Every day at 7:43 a.m., the stranger arrived at platform 3. He wore the same coat, navy blue, frayed at the cuffs, and carried no luggage, just a worn leather notebook tucked beneath his arm. His shoes were scuffed, one lace always trailing behind. His hair, snow white, was neatly combed, but his face was carved with lines of long winters and longer wars. He sat on the farthest bench, always the same one, with the brass plaque half worn off by time and weather. Nobody knew where he came from. Nobody knew where he went after the 8:05 train passed. But every morning, he waited. Not for the train, for something else. At first, the station workers thought he was just another lonely old man, someone whose rhythm had broken long ago, a former commuter perhaps stuck in the ritual of a job he no longer held. The janitor, Bill, once tried to offer him a cup of coffee. The stranger simply nodded in thanks but never took a sip. He never spoke, never begged, never bothered a soul. He just listened, to the shuffle of heels on tile, to the squeak of suitcase wheels, to the blaring of loudspeakers announcing late arrivals. He'd watch the people, some rushing, some strolling, some lost in their own music or misery, and write in his notebook, always in pencil, always the same small, steady hand. It wasn't until week 3 that someone heard him. Melody, a 17-year-old music student at the conservatory 2 blocks away, often passed through the station on her way to classes. She carried a violin case, her fingers always drumming some invisible rhythm on the handle. That morning the station was quieter than usual. Rain muted the city's usual chaos, and as she walked past platform 3, she heard it. A hum, low, foreign, not a pop tune, not jazz, not even classical, something older. She slowed, curiosity tightening around her. The stranger's lips barely moved. His eyes were closed, his shoulders still. The sound came from deep within, something remembered, not performed. She sat on the bench behind him as casually as she could, and listened. She didn't recognize the melody, not the scales, not the mode, but it moved her. It wasn't just music. It was a language, a history, a grief. He stopped suddenly, as if the world had touched him again. He looked over his shoulder, just once. His eyes found hers. Blue. Icy, but not unkind. Then he stood and left. Melody couldn't get the tune out of her head. She skipped her theory class, went straight to the practice room, and tried to recreate what she'd heard. Her fingers searched the strings, her ears hunted for tones that didn't belong in any Western scale. She failed. It wasn't just the notes, it was the weight behind them. That night she searched for the melody online. Nothing. No known anthems matched, no folk songs, no hymns. It was like it didn't exist. But it did. And so did he. The next morning she returned early, 6:50 a.m. The stranger was already there. Same coat, same bench, same silence. This time, she brought her violin. She sat a few benches away and began to play. Not the same melody, but something close, her own interpretation, a conversation. At first he didn't react, but then he opened his notebook and began to write. Over the next week, a silent rhythm formed. She came early. She played, he listened, he never praised, never commented, never offered more than a nod. But he always wrote, and she always watched. One morning, a page fell from his notebook as he left. She picked it up. It wasn't a journal entry, it was a musical staff, handwritten, with symbols she didn't recognize. The notation was ancient, Slavic, Turkish, something older. The melody sketched was haunting, filled with dissonant intervals and unfamiliar phrasing. At the top, scribbled in shaky pencil, Anthem of the Forgotten Legion. She froze. What legion? What anthem? She went to her music history professor, a thin man with horn-rimmed glasses and a habit of pacing. He squinted at the sheet, then sat. This isn't Western, not entirely. Some of these intervals, they're Eastern modal. Persian, perhaps, but this phrasing, look here, this isn't anything I've seen in formal archives. What does that mean? Melody asked. He looked up. It means this might not be from a nation. It might be from a unit, a people, something oral, something buried. Melody returned the next morning with the page in hand. The stranger was already seated. She approached him slowly. "You dropped this," she said. He looked at the page, then at her. "Where did you hear it?" she asked. He stared. Then, for the first time, he spoke. A whisper. "Nowhere. Anymore." Melody sat down, heart racing. "Who are you?" He didn't answer, but he smiled and hummed. Not the same tune, a new one with even more sorrow and just enough hope. The next morning, the stranger didn't come. For the first time in nearly a month, the bench on platform 3 sat empty. Melody waited. She played softly into the wind, hoping to draw him out, to coax the melody back into the world. But the notes seemed to fall flat without him there, as if they were only echoes in a vast and silent hall. Hours passed. The usual commuters came and went. No one noticed his absence. No one paused, except her. She returned the next day, and the day after. Still, nothing. It was on the 4th day that a train conductor named Elias approached her. He was middle-aged, gray creeping into his sideburns, and wore his uniform like a second skin. "You're looking for the old man, aren't you?" he asked. Melody nodded. "He hasn't been here, but I saw him last week. He got on the 8:05. First time I'd ever seen him actually bored." "Do you know where he went?" she asked. Elias hesitated. "That train ends in Calder Point. Small place, mostly woods and silence." Melody made up her mind. She'd go. The next morning, violin in hand and notebook in her backpack, she boarded the 8:05. The train ride was quiet. The city gave way to fields, then forests, then abandoned stations long since closed to the public. Calder Point was the last stop. It wasn't even a real station, just a rusted sign and a crumbling platform surrounded by pines. But he was there, sitting on a bench of stone, looking at nothing, waiting. "You left," she said. He looked up, unsurprised. "I had to. It was time." "For what?" "For them." Melody sat beside him. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of parchment, yellowed, fragile. He handed it to her. She opened it carefully. It was the full anthem, written in flowing hand-lettered lines with foreign symbols and strange notation. More detailed than the first excerpt. More mournful. And yet, triumphant. "At the end of the war," he said slowly, "we made a promise. To sing this only once more. In full. When we were together again." She looked at him, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled from his coat a worn insignia, nothing she recognized, not American, not European. It looked handmade, a sun rising over broken chains. "We weren't a country, we weren't a regiment, we were the forgotten, the ones who fought and then disappeared. No records, no honors, no graves." "But why?" "Because history isn't written by ghosts." That night they built a fire. Melody played, he hummed, and from the woods they came. Old men, scarred, limping, wrapped in coats too heavy for the season. One by one they stepped into the light. No words were exchanged, only nods, only glances. And when the anthem began, they all sang. Melody had never heard anything like it. It wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense. It was raw, broken, real, 100 lives braided into one song. When the final note fell, they stood in silence. Then, one by one, they turned and vanished back into the trees. All but the stranger. He stood last and turned to her. "Thank you," he said. "You remembered something you were never meant to hear." She wanted to ask more, so much more. But he only smiled and walked into the trees. The next morning, the bench on platform 3 was empty again. But Melody sat there, notebook in hand, and began to write. She didn't have all the notes. She didn't have the full history, but she had the echo, and sometimes an echo is all the world needs.